Well, so far in our series, we've covered really God's core plan for marriage. That first week, we talked about his purpose for marriage. And then the second week, Amy came and talked to us about God's design for marriage. And then last week, we moved into kind of the second part of this series, which is talking about several core qualities of a healthy marriage. And we're going to finish out the next few weeks looking at these things. So today we're going to be talking about respect and love. Next week, friendship and attention. Then we're going to talk about trust and commitment, and then wrap it up with forgiveness and grace. And so these things are all really important as we think about what a healthy marriage looks like. And I really wish that I had titled this week, instead of love and respect in your book, that I had titled it Respect and Love for a couple of reasons. One, there's a book that you may have heard of called Love and Respect, and I feel like people just automatically think that I'm going to teach on that book this week, and I'm not. And so we're going to talk about love and about respect, but I wish I had called it Respect and Love so that you didn't get confused about the title of the book, but also because respect really has to come first. You can respect someone and not love them, right? You probably have a lot of people that you know and respect, but you wouldn't really say you love them. But you can't love somebody without respecting them. You really can't. You have to have respect first. So that's the order that we're going to talk about them today. We're going to first talk about respect, and then we're going to talk about love. But first, I want to go back to week 1 of our series, because we really need to revisit the whole concept of contract versus covenant. Do you remember when we talked about that in week 1? Because a contract is a legal document. We said it is something that's put in place to protect the parties that are involved. And when one party breaks the contract, then the contract is void and the other person is no longer bound to uphold the contract. They're released from any sort of responsibility. But a covenant is an agreement between two parties of something they either will do or that they won't do. And each person's responsibility is not dependent on the other person's performance. So if I'm in a covenant and the person that I'm in a covenant with doesn't hold up their end of the bargain, I'm still holding mine up. I'm not released from that covenant. I'm still bound to keep it. And so we talked about how a contract is focused on mutual benefit, but a covenant is focused on mutual sacrifice. And that a contract really has a consumer mindset. What's in this for me? What can I get out of this? But a covenant has a contributor mindset. And God designed marriage to be a covenant, not a contract. When we get married on that wedding day and kind of early on in our marriage, we tend to have that covenant mindset, right? Of I want to love you and be the best spouse that I can be. And we have that mindset. But as we go through the days and the months and the years and we hit some conflict and we hit some bumps in the road, we begin to shift to more of a contract mindset. You're not quite holding up your end of the deal. This isn't quite what I thought, so I don't feel like I'm responsible to hold up my end. And we begin to shift into this contract mindset because this isn't what we thought it would be. And so the reason that I want to start here today is because as we talk about these qualities over the next few weeks, there is going to be this tendency in each of us to say, well, my husband, he doesn't really deserve my respect. If you knew him, he doesn't really deserve my trust or my forgiveness or my grace. And I am going to tell you, you're right. He probably doesn't. Whether he's trying his best or whether he has some areas where he's off the rails, none of us deserve love and grace and forgiveness and trust, right? But we're not talking about what we deserve. We're talking about a covenant where we have said, I promise these things to you. There's no if-then statement. Remember, we talked about that the first week. When you had your marriage vows, you didn't say, if you do these things, then I promise to do these things. No, you said, I will. I do promise to love you. And so there's just going to be this tendency for us to slip into that consumer mindset. I'm not getting what I deserve, so I'm not going to give him the things that he should be getting in marriage. And I want you to keep that covenant and contract mindset as we go through these qualities, because we don't only give these things when they're earned. That's not how God designed it to work. We hold up our end of the deal in a covenant, regardless of the other person. And then I just want you to keep in mind the big picture purposes for marriage, that marriage is for our sanctification. Remember, that's just a fancy word for us being made more like Jesus. It's an ongoing process of the rough edges being carved away, of our sinful nature being chipped away and refined. And that's not fun, right? It's not a fun process to see the places where you are falling short, the places where you're making mistakes, the places where you need to change. Those are hard and those are painful. So when you begin to feel that in marriage, I want you to expect it. I want you to know that that is a normal part of the process. So sanctification, glorifying God. When we give our husbands the things that he maybe hasn't earned or deserve, because God has told us that that's our job and that's what we need to do, we're glorifying God by obeying him. And then our marriage should be a reflection of Christ and the church and the way that he loves the church. And so we're going to get to that in a minute. So let's talk a little bit about respect and about love. Our key verse for this week really is Ephesians 5:33. And it says, talking to the husbands, it says, however, let each one of you love his wife as himself. And then let the wife see that she respects her husband. Now, this is a really important verse, but I think some people have some misconceptions that husbands need respect and wives need love, when really we both need both of those things. This verse is not the only commandment in Scripture to husbands and wives, okay? Because our husbands need love and we as wives need respect. Those things really go together. So I want you to hear me say that today. But let's talk about respect first. The word here in Ephesians 5:33 for respect, it means to reverence, to treat with deference or reverential obedience. Now, what is respect versus reverence? Respect is really a nice, kind attitude that you give to strangers and that you're supposed to give, maybe your grandmother or people who are above you or in charge of you. But it's motivated externally, just kind of by the rules of society a lot of times when we think about just general respect. Reverence is really, it's a deeper spiritual attitude, and it comes from inside of us. It's really our choice. And respect communicates value. Respect communicates value. I want you to think about that in your marriage, because when you feel disrespected, whether it's in your marriage or in another relationship, if you think about it, you really are feeling a sense of less than, almost, right? You don't feel like that other person values you. And so respect and reverence says, I value you, your thoughts, your desires, your opinions. Respect says, I want you to be who God made you to be, not who I would prefer that you be. Respect takes into account our differences and allows for them and appreciates them. Respect requires communication. Respect requires that I listen, that I understand, that I ask questions, that I use the right tone of voice, that I don't shut down in a conversation, that I'm willing to communicate two ways. Respect requires that I don't shut my husband down when he's trying to tell me how he feels about something. It's easy for us to do that, right? Well, I didn't mean that. You shouldn't feel that way. And we discount his thoughts and his feelings. Respect requires that we validate each other's feelings rather than discredit them. And respect shows itself by exhibiting trust, both by trusting the other person, but also by being trustworthy. And we do that by things like keeping our word, but also we prove our trustworthiness by listening to what our husband says, by listening to what he thinks about something without criticizing or making fun of or judging him. We become trustworthy by listening to him when he says we've done something that hurt his feelings. We become trustworthy by allowing our husband to trust that he can be vulnerable with us in communication. And so, bottom line, respect is really a declaration of value for someone. Respect is a declaration of value for someone. Respect says, you're important to me, so I'm going to listen to you. You're important to me, so I'm going to take your opinion into account. You're important to me, so I'm going to treat you like I would want to be treated. There's a blogger named Chris Ownby, and he writes this about respect in marriage. He says, the show of respect is usually thought of as coming from a place of inferiority. Pictures come to mind of soldiers standing at attention when high-ranking officers enter the room, or of hardworking employees speaking highly of their boss. Respect in a healthy marriage, though, is different. It's a two-way street. Both parties in the relationship crave and deserve equal respect from each other, and rightly so. Here's how he closes this. Respect is shown in marriage not because one person is more superior than the other, but because each person recognizes the value of the other. And so what I want to say to all of us today, including myself, is if you're struggling with respect for your husband today, maybe you need to stop and ask yourself, am I valuing him? Am I valuing the things that he does for our family? Am I valuing him as God's partner for me? Am I valuing the way he does things? Because respect paves the way for intimacy and vulnerability in a relationship, because it frees you of the fear of being devalued or judged. How many times have you thought you've been in a conflict with your husband and you're like, I really want to talk about it, but I'm afraid that it'll just end up in a fight of us arguing. And then you feel like your feelings aren't important. You don't feel valued, and he's probably feeling the same way. And so having that respect for each other allows you to communicate freely because you know that you can trust that other person, because we said respect shows itself as trust, right? And so respect allows your friendship to grow, because friendship is based on appreciating and valuing someone. You see how this all kind of fits together? So when we value someone, we respect them. And then in a minute, we're going to talk about how that then becomes the foundation for loving someone. Respect does not mean never speaking up. Respect does not mean that we never disagree, or that we allow abusive or manipulative behavior and we just say, well, Carrie said I should respect my husband. I am not, please hear me correctly today. There is a place for healthy boundaries. There's a place for you to reach out and get help. But on the whole, for those of us who are in, I hate using this word, but I'm just going to call your average group of marriages. There is a place for us to improve our respect for our husbands, but it does not look like enabling bad behavior. It does not look like being passive. It does not look like having no boundaries. Because disrespect in a relationship, let's get really practical. What does disrespect in a relationship look like? It can look like nagging. It can look like criticism. It can look like discrediting our husband's feelings and his thoughts at times. Lying, put downs, pressuring the other, disloyalty, manipulation, threats. If we begin to open our eyes to just what some of these seemingly mild forms of disrespect look like, and I'm speaking to myself here too, I think we'd see them throughout our days in the ways that we interact with our husband. Because here's the thing, sometimes we forget we're on the same team. I was reading a blog about marriage, and this guy just had some different points for, kind of things to do to improve your marriage. And one of them was he just said, check your jersey. And I was like, okay, that's really good. Every once in a while, we need to just stop and we need to say, hey, we're both wearing the same jersey. We both play for the same team, because sometimes I think we forget about that and we can almost become competitive with each other. I don't know about your parenting, but it may be that one of you is more strict and one of you is more lenient, and sometimes it feels like a competition of who the kids like better. Sometimes it can be a competition of who's contributing more around the house. Sometimes it can be a competition of who's contributing more outside of the house, who's bringing in a bigger paycheck. And we forget that we're on the same team. I read this the other day, and I think about this a lot now, just talking about insecurity. Because a lot of this is driven by insecurity, right? When we feel insecure, we tend to try to either prop ourselves up or pull the other person down. And so what I was reading the other day, it kind of got me to thinking about it, and I sort of summed it up to the fact that insecurity says that when my husband wins, I lose. Or when anybody else around me wins, I'm losing. That our success exists in an inverse relationship. Okay? Going back to math here. But that our success exists in an inverse relationship. The more you succeed, the less I succeed. But security and humility says when one of us wins, we both win. And that's what marriage should be. That's what marriage should be, but it takes humility and it takes remembering that we are on the same team, that we are in this together and not against each other. So practically, what does this look like? Well, I think I've told you this before and we've talked about it, but men gravitate to wherever they feel successful. And so this does not mean that we're going to use flattery, that we're going to use false praise, that we're just going to say, oh, you're the best ever, when he's clearly screwing everything up over here, okay? I'm not talking about just telling him he's the best, no matter what. But men are going to gravitate to where they feel successful. I've seen it over and over and over. And when they don't feel like they're successful at home, if they're a good salesman for their company, they're going to end up being salesman of the year. And they're going to pour themselves into the places that they feel successful. And so I'm telling you right now, you have an opportunity when your kids are young especially to make him feel successful as a dad, even if he does things differently than you would. To make him feel successful as a husband, even if he's not doing things perfectly. Right? Think about how we interact with our kids when we teach them how to clean their room or make their bed, and we come in and it's done but a mess still, what do we say? We don't come in and just blast them for everything they did wrong, right? We point out the things they did right, knowing that over time they're going to improve, they're going to get better. And we can do the same thing with our husbands. We can notice where he's succeeding. We can notice the things he's doing well. We can notice that he unloaded the dishwasher or folded some clothes or played with the kids for a little while you had just 5 minutes by yourself. And we can speak those things to him. Because sometimes we notice, but we don't speak those things. And so he doesn't know what we're thinking in our head. If we notice, but we never say, hey, I appreciate that. If you want your husband to do more of something, point it out. Say, man, I appreciate that so much. You don't know how much it helped for you to just come in and unload the dishwasher. But for whatever reason, sometimes we're resistant because we think, well, he should just automatically know to do that. He should just automatically step in and fill that gap for me. Doesn't he notice? Doesn't he see all the things that need to be done before I can sit down after the kids go to bed? Well, let me just let you in on a secret. No, he doesn't. I don't know how, but he doesn't. He doesn't see them. I don't know your husbands, but I'm just going to go out on a limb and say that most of them want to be successful at home. They want to help you. And we as wives have to get over ourselves by just expecting them to know what needs to be done and see it and automatically do it. We can ask them for help. We can help them know how to be successful, and then we can point it out when they are. Chris Ownby, the blogger that I read from earlier, he says, declare your spouse's value in your actions. Declare your spouse's value in your actions, just the way we treat each other. It declares how much we value that person. Respecting each other is huge for your kids as well because they will learn how to treat others by watching you and your husband interact. And they'll either learn how to be respectful to other people or they won't. But hopefully they see us treating each other with respect and valuing each other. Now, I want to pause here for just a minute because one of the biggest breakdowns of respect in marriage happens because there's a tendency for us as women to take over, right? Anybody? We can sometimes feel like our husband is making the wrong decision for our family, or that we would do things differently, and we feel like our only option is to step in and take over. Again, there are some specific situations where that might be the right thing to do, okay? So don't hear me say, I'm really worried about you taking things the wrong way today. So there are some situations where that might be appropriate, but on the whole, I want to share this illustration with you that one of my mentors in college shared. She said, our marriage is like an umbrella. I meant to bring an umbrella today. Our marriage is like an umbrella, and if you picture this umbrella, your husband's responsibility is to God. Okay?